Some residents of Mocimboa da Praia, the last insurgent stronghold in northern Mozambique, have begun returning to their homes after 5 months. Earlier this week, a joint force of Mozambican and Rwandan troops liberated the strategic port town in Cabo Delgado province from armed militants who seized it in August last year. Last month, Rwanda sent 1,000 soldiers to support the Mozambican forces fighting the militants who launched an insurgency in 2017. They were joined this week by thousands of troops from the Southern African regional bloc SADC. More than 3,000 people have been killed and over 800,000 displaced as the insurgents attack villages. A $20 billion gas project, which the government had hoped would transform the economy, has also been suspended after an attack in a nearby town. And the families venturing back home after the recent military gains remain apprehensive. Let's hear more from Dewa Mavhinga, the Southern African director at Human Rights Watch. Thanks a lot for joining us. Why is the recapture of Mocimboa da Praia significant, and why are civilians still worried about going back?
Well, it means that there is a degree of control that is coming from the Mozambican authorities with support from the SADC and Rwandan forces. But the big challenge remains that of security and humanitarian access. So for civilians, it remains unsafe because fresh attacks are possible and unpredictable. And this is why it is important for there to be time in which the newly recaptured town should be placed under civilian control, and the government forces should be satisfied that the possibility of another attack from the militants will not be happening anytime soon.
But isn't that wishful thinking, to think that this area is secure enough for only civilians to dwell there?
Well, but what we have seen now is that in recent months, there has been a significant increase in the attacks by the militants and their control. But now, for the first time, this is a significant pushback. And the Mozambican authorities now have external support from SADC and from the Rwandan forces. So this is why there is so much hope, and that this town now presents a real chance that the militants could be pushed out completely from this area.
Tell us about the toll this conflict is taking on residents and what can be done to support those returning.
It has been a massive toll because not only have the militants committed gross human rights abuses, but also the security forces of Mozambique have been implicated and civilians have suffered. Since April 2020, we have seen that over 800,000 civilians have been forced to flee into different areas and are unable to return. And the most affected are children and women, and thousands have been killed. And we hope that as the security forces are now working their way back, they strictly respect the rights of civilians and ensure that there is proper protection, and that in the search and operations against militants, civilians are not harmed and are not put in harm's way, and that there is access for humanitarian groups that need to support the people to be able to reach the beneficiaries that they need to reach. This has not always happened in the past.
The military intervention by Rwandan forces and SADC troops is only happening now. Could this have happened earlier? And would it have prevented the deaths and displacement of people there?
The intervention should absolutely have happened earlier. It was long overdue, and part of the reason was that the Mozambican authorities delayed and were reluctant to seek out support from the country's neighbors. And yes, if the intervention was much earlier, it would definitely have saved thousands of lives and would have prevented the carnage that we saw. But as it is happening now, what is important is to ensure that it is sustained and that the security forces working together are respectful of the rights of civilians and also facilitate access for humanitarian groups that need to support civilians so that they are able to resume their lives and to get the much needed support that they need in terms of shelter, in terms of food, in terms of health facilities, because many of those were destroyed during the attacks.
Dewa Mavhinga, the Southern Africa Director at Human Rights Watch. That's Africa Matters for today. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next week.